Bonjour.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. I call this meeting to order.
Number 44 to Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Pursuant to the motion adopted on Monday, May the 4th, 2026, the committee is meeting on homelessness in Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Before we begin, all those participating have the option of choosing to participate in the official language of their choice. In the room, please select the channel that gives you that option. Make sure you're on the right one. If you're appearing virtually, please click on the globe icon at the bottom of your surface and choose the official language you wish to participate in. The clerk has advised me those appearing virtually have been sound tested and the sound quality allows for the required translation to both official languages. Please, couple of things. If you could, put your devices on silence mode. Please avoid from tapping the microphone boom for the protection of our interpreters. As well, wait until I address you by name, and please direct all questions or inquiries through myself, the clerk. So today, in the first panel on homelessness, I would like to welcome our witnesses from the International Community Consortium, appearing virtually, Gary Gladstone. From Réseau d'aide aux personnes seules et itinéraires de Montréal, Annie Savage, Director. Welcome. Safe Haven Foundation of Canada, Christina Lloyd, Chief Executive Officer. Each witness will have 5 minutes for their opening statements, and I would ask you, when you're at 5, I will say thank you, and I would then ask you to conclude as soon as possible. So we will begin with Mr. Gladstone. Mr. Gladstone, you have 5 minutes for your opening.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to appear today.
Mr. Gladstone, just a moment.
Désolé, Monsieur le Président, la traduction.
Mr. Chair, interpretation is not working for me. In French.
Mr. Gladstone, there is an issue with translation.
No problem.
For translation. Good. Well. Okay, Mr. Gladstone, if you could start from the top again, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to appear today. Sorry I can't be there in person. My name is Gary Gladstone, and I am chair of the Intentional Community Consortium, or the ICC. The ICC is a national coalition of more than 80 nonprofit organizations working to expand affordable, accessible, and supportive housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities across Canada. I am also lead stakeholder relations for RENA, one of Ontario's largest developmental service organizations. Today, I would like to make a simple point. Canada cannot solve homelessness without addressing the housing needs of people with developmental disabilities. For years, ICC and our members have advocated that people with developmental disabilities must remain a distinct priority within federal housing policy. Recent research now demonstrates why. A major Ontario study led by Dr. Sylvain Roy examined more than 2,000 individuals in shelters and found that developmental disabilities are significantly overrepresented and frequently hidden within the homelessness system. The most defensible estimate is that between 13 and 15% of shelter residents have a developmental disability, with prevalence potentially as high as 25%. The study also found that approximately 80% of these individuals experience chronic homelessness. Many have never been properly identified. Many are disconnected from developmental services. Many are living in shelters because there's simply nowhere else for them to go. What is particularly important for this committee to understand is that this is not simply an affordability issue. The research found that approximately 60% of individuals with developmental disabilities in shelters require high-intensity housing supports. Many are unable to successfully maintain housing without assistance navigating daily living, finances, appointments, healthcare, and community supports. The problem is not simply a lack of housing, it is a lack of the right housing. The report concludes that the issue is not a lack of need, it is not a lack of need, it is a lack of the right housing. The report concludes that the issue is not a lack of need, it is a lack of identification, coordination, and appropriate housing pathways. This confirms what our sector has known for years. Homelessness for many individuals with developmental disabilities is not primarily an affordability problem, it is a supportability problem. People are being placed into housing systems that assume a level of independence they do not have. The research found that nearly 60% of individuals with developmental disabilities in shelters require high-intensity housing supports. Without supportive housing, many cycle repeatedly through shelters, hospitals, crisis services, emergency rooms, policing interactions, and inappropriate institutional settings. The federal government recognized this reality under the original National Housing Strategy, following advocacy by ICC and others, by identifying people with developmental disabilities as a priority population and committing to 2,400 housing units. Unfortunately, fewer than 900 of these units have been delivered. As Canada develops National Housing Strategy 2.0, this population must not disappear from federal priorities. ICC is recommending 5 actions. First, people with developmental disabilities must remain an explicit population with the National Housing Strategy 2.0, with a commitment to create, preserve, or acquire at least 3,000 additional affordable, accessible, and supportive homes by 2031. Second, the federal government should establish a dedicated funding stream of at least $1 billion over 5 years for supportive housing serving this population. Third, Build Canada Homes and future housing programs should support portfolio-based delivery models through organizations such as ICC that can aggregate projects and help smaller agencies succeed. Fourth, federally funded supportive housing should incorporate appropriate care occupancy, B3 fire code, and universal accessibility standards from the outset. Fifth, housing benefits and long-term operating supports must be expanded to ensure affordability and sustainability. The solution to homelessness is not simply more housing, it is the right housing. Across Canada, ICC members are already building that housing. The Lou Fruitman Arena Residence, the Frankfurt Family Arena Residence, and projects being developed by ICC members such as KW Habilitation across the country demonstrate that supportive, inclusive, intentional community models work. The projects exist, the expertise exists, the partnership exists. What is needed now is a federal commitment to ensure that people with developmental disabilities are fully included in Canada's homelessness and housing strategies. Because if 1 in every 6 to 8 shelter residents has a developmental disability, then reducing homelessness requires addressing developmental disability housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gladstone. Madame Savage pour 5 minutes.
5 minutes, Ms. Savage. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this study. My name is Annie Savage. I am representing RAPSIM, which brings together 99 organizations working in homelessness prevention and reduction in Montreal. RAPSIM's main message is simple. The fight against homelessness cannot be reduced to a housing policy. It requires a comprehensive response that addresses housing, the social determinants of health, frontline care, and the stability of community responses all at once. The federal government must substantially increase its investments in homelessness. In Montreal, as part of the Reaching Home 2026-2028 call for projects, 204 priority projects representing more than $304 million were submitted. The needs expressed were nearly 4 times the available funding, and only 69 projects could be renewed and funded. The impacts of the cuts caused by this underfunding are being strongly felt on the ground right now. To allow them to consolidate their services and plan their actions, homelessness organizations need funding agreements of at least 5 years, indexed annually. The federal government must broaden its approach to prevention so that it can act on the full range of social determinants. The paths leading to homelessness are rarely the result of a single event. They are shaped by poverty, health problems, loss of housing, violence, social isolation, or precarious migratory status. The government must also avoid pitting investments in homelessness prevention against those aimed at addressing its consequences. Both are necessary and complementary. Our third message concerns housing. RAPSIM advocates for the right to housing, which is essential to providing a true alternative to the street. However, outreach and frontline initiatives remain just as necessary to reach people who do not yet have access to housing, who are not able to access it immediately, or who are at risk of losing it. Pathways to residential stability are not linear. Investments in housing and investments in community services must therefore advance together in order to offer both exit routes from the street and the support needed to avoid becoming entrenched there or returning to it. The federal government has an important role to play in supporting the development of integrated frontline care and fostering better coordination between interventions in homelessness, mental health, addiction, housing, and immigration. People experiencing homelessness face multiple difficulties simultaneously. They often carry the consequences of complex trauma and repeated violence experienced before and during their time without housing. These experiences contribute to the deterioration of their health and make a lasting exit from homelessness more difficult when they are not addressed through appropriate care. Finally, we wish to draw your attention to the issue of emergency response. In Montreal, last winter, more than 900 temporary emergency spaces had to be added in order to protect the lives of people for whom the street is home. These necessary measures must be properly planned and benefit from dedicated funding separate from budgets intended for regular community services. The current crisis is not the result of a lack of expertise or commitment from communities, but of an unprecedented gap between the needs observed on the ground and the resources available. Beyond housing, it is a comprehensive, sustainable response adapted to the realities of communities that the federal government must support. Thank you.
Madame Savage.
Thank you.
Ms. Lloyd, please.
Chair and members of the committee, hello, bonjour, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. While I'm here in my capacity as CEO of the Safe Haven Foundation of Canada, what I also bring with me is a unique combination of relevant professional and personal experience. Over the course of my career, I have led community investment initiatives for one of Canada's leading energy providers. I have worked alongside Indigenous communities advancing their own visions for self-determination, and I have served as a consultant supporting community initiatives at every level of government. But equally important is my lived experience. As a young person, at the age of 16, I left an unstable home and experienced what we now describe as hidden homelessness. Eventually, I was able to access the people and the resources that allowed me to reclaim my future and ultimately sit before you today with a deep understanding of the pathways that lead to homelessness, the systems that exist around it, and most importantly, the programs that prevent it. Now, there is no question that Canada is facing a housing and homelessness crisis. You will hear that reality reflected in the testimony of every witness you hear from today. I am certain of it. But the message I have for you today is intended to be a hopeful one. Because if my words are being received as testimony, let me be your evidence that homelessness is preventable when we invest early enough. For 30 years, Safe Haven Foundation has been preventing homelessness among girls and young women aged 14 to 26. Our work is rooted in the internationally recognized foyer model, an approach that integrates safe housing with wellness, life skills development, education, and employment coaching, all within a caring community environment. Safe Haven is often the last program they ever need to wholly rely on. And what makes our model so successful is that we intervene before homelessness takes root. That imperative comes to life through 3 integrated program streams. The first is Haven's Way, where young women live in a family-style environment supported by live-in house parents, which is one of the key differentiators of our model, and begin rebuilding safety, stability, trust, and confidence. The second is Havens Harbor, which provides bridge housing and continued support for young women interested in greater independence while they continue their education journey. And the third is Havens Rise, the first program of its kind in Canada, which provides qualified alumni with the gift of a down payment for the purchase of a home. Because what we believe is that true prevention goes beyond helping someone simply avoid homelessness today, it also empowers them to build generational stability for tomorrow. And together, these programs create a pathway that maximize outcomes for our youth, because we provide the time and the depth of support that leads to opportunities which elevate their voices and their decision-making power. Our program is not time-bound. There are no parameters or time limits on their length of stay with us. And through the process, they begin to feel cared for and empowered, which then produces a level of kindness and empathy that they carry with them into a world that needs those qualities, especially in positions of power. And what I can tell you is that it works and the outcomes are beautiful. They're breaking cycles and contributing to more resilient communities. Yet despite the evidence that I'm sharing with you, prevention remains one of the least funded areas of Canada's homelessness response, and the need for prevention is only growing. The rising cost of living is turning unstable situations into untenable ones for at-risk youth in urban communities, while rural communities across Canada lack youth-specific shelter and housing options, leaving young people with few alternatives but to relocate to urban centres where the risks of exploitation and addiction are greater. We are also seeing more newcomer youth navigating family and cultural tensions, which can escalate very quickly into homelessness. And we are beginning to see more Indigenous youth arriving to urban centres after receiving settlement payments without the relationships and supports needed to protect them from exploitation. So if there's one message I hope this committee takes away today, it is this: invest in prevention. Invest in the educators and the professionals who can identify the early indicators of hidden homelessness. Create incentives for organizations to intervene early with depth of care over breadth of care with no time limits, and empower proven models like Safe Haven to share resources and approaches with organizations across Canada. Because if we do this, I truly believe we will finally find ourselves on the path to ending homelessness in this country. Thank you.
We'll begin the 6-minute round of questioning with Mr. Aitchison for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses who are here. I have a few different questions, and I'm going to start with Mr. Gladstone. I don't think you mentioned this, Gary, in your initial comments, but in terms of housing wait lists, can you tell us, how long persons with disabilities would wind up on wait lists? How much longer it takes to establish permanent housing for persons with disabilities than maybe the regular population?
Absolutely, and thank you very much. In Ontario alone, there are over 24,000 individuals on the housing waiting list, which takes approximately 40 years for someone with intellectual and developmental
Gary?
disabilities. Yes?
Hold on.
I did. How is interpretation now? Your turn. Good? Okay, we'll start at the start. Mr. H, would you start at the top of phrasing your questioning, your question again to Mr. Gladstone?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Gary, in terms of housing wait lists for persons with disabilities, can you give us some sense of the number of people on that list, how much longer it would take for persons with disabilities to get permanent housing than perhaps the general population?
Thank you very much. In Ontario alone, there is currently a 40-year waiting list for housing for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, with over 24,000 individuals currently in Ontario alone on the wait list, and the numbers are similar across the country. I'll also indicate that 18.5% of those households living in core housing need are led by a person with intellectual disabilities, and it's not getting better.
Can you give us a sense of how many units are needed to fill that gap? I'm sure it's not just a simple number, but could you give us a sense of how many units?
Well, we would be looking for funds to have 3,000 units across the country now that will significantly reduce and will allow us to continue. Right now, in urgent situations, individuals with developmental disabilities are being warehoused in hospitals and long-term care. Terrible status of life for them and a terrible expense to the system.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I'd like to move on to Ms. Savage. Savage, I will not do this justice, unfortunately, in English or in French, but you made a statement about we must avoid pitting investment in housing against the outcomes of homelessness. If I captured that correctly?
J'ai pas la traduction.
Sorry, I don't have.
On doit éviter de comparer. Je m'excuse. Ça fonctionnait, puis ça a arrêté de fonctionner.
I'll try again. Yeah, thanks. During your opening remarks, you made a statement about the importance of avoiding pitting the investment into housing against the outcomes of non-housing or homelessness. I probably haven't quite got it correct, but it struck me, and I didn't entirely understand what you meant by it when you used the words pitting one against the other.
Ce que je veux dire, c'est qu'on ne doit pas.
What I mean is that we can't replace the overall intervention that's necessary for homelessness by a housing policy. Both need to be done together. Both are complementary and necessary. So we must absolutely have programs, federal programs, that develop social housing that is truly affordable, so that the poorest and most excluded individuals of the housing market can access housing and keep that housing. However, with the crisis that we're in, a number of people currently need housing. They need support, ongoing support. Work in the streets is essential to go help these people who don't have access to housing, who live in tents and camps. We need to establish a connection with those individuals who don't have access to housing because they aren't able to get housing right now, or they might have lost their housing, or they're on the brink of losing their housing.
That's an excellent explanation. Would you, in your experience, is it your observation that all too often politicians, when looking for emergency solutions, don't think about the importance of the wraparound supports? They just think, get beds, get them off the street. That's the solution? Out of sight, out of mind?
En fait, il y a beaucoup.
In fact, currently, there are many needs, long-term, medium-term, and short-term needs. There's nothing that we can afford to ignore. In Montreal, there is a diversity of measures to meet these different needs, but we don't have the means. In fact, we can't afford to not take advantage of any of the programs offered by these community organizations. And there's this kind of opposition, between prevention, which is necessary and efficient, and that's to the detriment of acting on the consequences of homelessness. Of course, we definitely want to work upstream, to be proactive. We want to prevent homelessness, and not just when it comes to the idea of losing housing. We really want to focus on all social determinants of health to prevent homelessness. But it's important to not neglect the fact that we do have to do something about the consequences. But it's not one or the other. It's both of them together. If your house is flooded, yes, you're going to have to turn off the faucets, but you also have to take care of the home's foundation. So both are important.
It's an excellent analogy. Thank you for that. I have, how much? 50 seconds. That's almost a minute. Ms. Lloyd, I would ask you a similar question. In your observation, in your experience, your lived experience, I think is a very powerful story here. Thank you for sharing it. Would you say that all too often politicians at all levels are inclined to sort of, get the emergency shelter bed open and just not think about it much more than that?
Yes, absolutely. And again, and this is why so many peers within the sector are so focused on, I use the words breadth over depth, because again, in order to secure funding from both government and non-government sources, the focus is on volume, number of beds, turnover. And so, Safe Haven Foundation, for example, is will try and adapt to that language. We talk about the way that our program, which is supports youth through an average of a 2 to 4 year stay, translates to bed nights. All right.
Si, excuse me, merci, Monsieur Aitchison. Monsieur Joseph, pour.
Mr. Joseph. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, of course, Mr. Chair, with all the respect that I have for you, I'd like to thank you as well for your leadership during this study. Mr. Chair, I want to be clear this morning. I am disappointed because rather than continue working on this issue of homelessness, the Bloc Québécois has gone back to partisan tactics. Do I have to remind the Bloc that they voted against the 2025 budget, against transitional housing, $100 billion? And now, in fact, Mr. Chair, the truth is that the Bloc Québécois is taking for granted the community organizations, just as they take for granted Quebecers who are working on the ground. Mr. Chair, the Bloc has been very partisan in that chamber and has done nothing for homelessness. I'm wondering, what are we doing here? And I'll remind the Bloc. Must I remind the Bloc who proposed the study? Mr. Chair, the Bloc Québécois knows very well that we are working proactively on homelessness. I'm disappointed because the Bloc, on the 1st of July in Quebec, well, in fact, they said one thing, but they know very well that there are help services for housing offered by services run by the government. I wanted to take this opportunity to ask the Bloc to stop interfering with things that are under the province's jurisdiction. Yes, we are MPs, and some of them are of the Bloc, but we're also federal MPs. There are things that were raised as part of this study that could be good for the writing of Mr. Villeneuve or Ms. Larouche, we have been given statistics saying that homelessness is rising in writings of Mr. Lamire and Ms. Larouche, but in fact this rise took place under the mandates of these MPs. So this is the Bloc Québécois we're talking about, because this MPs have been around for more than 5 years and they've done nothing for homelessness. A former Bloc MP traveled all around Quebec on the taxpayers' dime, claiming that they wanted to end homelessness. That's nonsense. We can't accept that here, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Ms. Annie Savage. Mr. Chair, can I please have my time? I don't want to be cut off, Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Ms. Savage. Are you aware that the current government has invested $1 billion in transitional housing? And how will this contribute to your organization? Please go ahead. Are you aware that I've traveled from Montreal to come speak with you here at the committee, and that you just stole some of our time that we could have used speaking, and that we've come to tell you about our community needs? I want to be clear, ma'am. Apologies, but I could give the time to somebody else.
Please, I would remind all members, witnesses are here to respond to questions on the study. Members, it's their time. Long as you're using your time on the subject of homelessness, then that is your time. So, Monsieur Joseph, à vous la parole.
You have the floor, Mr. Joseph. Mr. Chair, I will continue with Ms. Annie. I'm asking you a question in good faith. Are you aware that the federal government has invested $1 billion in transitional housing? I don't want to answer this partisan question. I am part of a community group. These are not the type of statements I wish to make, and I also don't want to be instrumentalized by a political party.
Mani, on est là pour parler des...
Ms. Annie, we're here to talk about people in vulnerable situations. You are here to talk about people who you're defending. You agree? Do you agree, and are you aware that the government has invested $1 billion in transitional housing, especially in Quebec, but everywhere in Canada? I will say the same thing. I don't wish to answer this question, which, in my opinion, is a partisan one. I am not here for that purpose. Are you aware? This has nothing to do with partisanship. Perhaps you could go on to another question. Well, we can see the bad faith here.
1 minute.
1 minute. 1 minute. I'll ask the same question of Ms. Annie. Are there signals that would allow the government to act quicker for individuals who are at risk? Do you have any recommendations for the Reaching Home program? Yes, of course, we have many recommendations. We do have some indicators. We have counts for the entire country and for Quebec, and it indicates that there is an intense increase in homelessness, and that has been noticed over the last few years. We also have strong evidence on the causes of homelessness. One of the primary causes of homelessness is the loss of housing. And when people lose their housing, it's often because... I'm going to interrupt you. Thank you.
Madame Savage, Madame Larouche.
Thank you, Ms. Savage. Ms. Larouche, 6 minutes. Thank you very much to the witnesses for being here with us today. I might come back to you, Mr. Gladstone. Thank you very much for speaking to the aspect of individuals with special needs. They also need to be supported to get off the streets. Ms. Lloyd, your story is very inspiring, and that is an incredible model that you have for offering an alternative and support for young people. I hope I'll have time to come back to you, but I will start with you, Ms. Savage. What I have really noted from the beginning of this study is that there is no magic wand for fixing homelessness. Yes, building Canada homes, we're working on community affordable social housing, but if we look upstream, it's in 2 weeks, it'll be July 1st. In the city of Montreal, well, it tripled its budget for helping with homelessness. Quebec just announced $12.5 million this morning. Renewing the encampment program, well, it needs to be enhanced too to take into account the rising needs, right, with July 1st approaching. Beyond the amounts invested, yes, there have been considerable investments made by the three government levels, but what we need is true coordination between them and the ability to plan ahead on a more long-term basis. I'll give you an example. The Reaching Home program, usually that's a 2-year thing. That does not give organizations a chance to have a long-term vision and plan ahead, for example, to develop. We've got organizations that received funding to develop infrastructure for a welcome center. And when they went to give out that financing, the request was actually refused, not because it wasn't a priority, but because there was not enough funding available. So there's an inconsistency here with those investments. We need an overall approach. If it was 5 years, that would give us some foresight. We could develop things. We could develop partnerships, for example, with other organizations like Médecins du Monde. That way we can offer health care, outreach. We can be very close to the organizations. That's the kind of work that could be possible if we had a more coordinated overall approach, and it would give us more planning ability. You are doing remarkable work. I have followed your work, and it's very inspiring. You have been making miracles happen. And even in your opening remarks, if I understood properly, you said that the needs are 4 times what is available. So being able to look ahead, predictability, you need extra supports. July 1st is coming up. Do all levels of government? Yes, we've heard announcements like the City of Montreal and the Government of Quebec, but at the federal level, this program, which is very much appreciated, the Reaching Home program, I know it's needed because you're saying 4 times the needs, so that's significant. Yes, we need to increase that. The first challenge with Reaching Home is not its pillars or its direction, it's the investments. They are not significant enough for the needs. And there's also an issue around flexibility. The categories for funding, the sectors that are funded under Reaching Home, they're very rigid. And so it doesn't allow for developing more generic and organic solutions. And there needs to be a connection with healthcare. Yes, creating that link between the network and the people who work with individuals on the ground. When it comes to support services, these individuals need additional help, and that needs to be offered by the network. To come back to Reaching Home, you work in Montreal. I'm in the riding of Shefford. Grand Bay is the main center, and they've got growing needs there as well when it comes to homelessness. For years, I've been asking about designated communities in a context where we talk about decentralizing homelessness. Well, Grand Bay is not recognized as a designated community, so they don't get the same attention. Is that something that you're noticing as well when you discuss with our colleagues elsewhere in Quebec? Is that also a need? Do you think more towns need to be recognized as designated communities? Yes, absolutely. For example, Indigenous peoples, that's a good example. If they had been able to find services they need in their communities, services that would meet their needs, they wouldn't have had to leave their hometowns and go to places like Montreal. And then they would run into, a shortage of services. And Montreal is the epicenter of homelessness, and we saw that with the with the count. Homelessness is on the rise everywhere. So if we want to act proactively, that's the whole community, all of Quebec, the whole region. Yes, there are solutions that can be put forward. I have very little time left, but let's talk affordability. Because sometimes we wonder with Building Homes Canada, should we talk about social and community housing more? That would be more representative of the needs, maybe. Yes, I'm not a specialist of Building Homes Canada, but from what I understand, emphasis is really being put on affordable housing. For us, this is not coherent with the needs we're seeing. Affordability for individuals who are really excluded from the rental market, while they need, rent prices that they can actually afford. Community groups develop solutions that are adapted, but on a small scale. So you have to be able to develop solutions that would create places where one can live, all while supporting them in their housing, but also supporting them to keep that housing. Thank you very much, Ms. Larouche.
Mr. Reynolds, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to the witnesses for coming here today, and also thank you so much for your hard work day in, day out to try and make Canada a better place with less homeless people. My first question is for Christina. You had mentioned something, hidden homelessness. Can you explain that? What does that mean?
Homelessness is the experience of couch surfing is a good way to describe it, right? So it's that sliver of time where youth in particular are doing everything they can to avoid being home. So that means spending extra time at a friend's house is how it may begin, sleeping in an extra room, on a couch, potentially putting the need for a place to stay out into social media. And what quickly occurs is that the goodwill starts running out, the options become fewer and fewer and more dangerous, and the wrong people take notice and start paying attention. And that's when there's the greatest risk, but also the greatest opportunity to intervene and provide whole person support.
So you mentioned that you intervene at that point, or you intervene before there's homelessness. How does that work?
So it's that point where we often step in. So who we hear from and who we receive referrals from might be the parent of a youth whose friend is spending a whole lot of extra time at their home and has opened up and shared. We rely very heavily on educators, teachers who can identify those early indicators of a youth returning to school wearing the same clothes or potentially sharing. And so that's why when I talked about sort of what can we do to invest more greatly in prevention, it's in education systems. It's, in Alberta, our education system is so overwhelmed. Teachers don't have the time and space anymore to pay attention to those indicators, and that's putting us at greater risk.
Okay, thank you. My next question is for you, Mr. Gladstone. You had mentioned that we need to build 3,000 homes to support people with disabilities. My question is, what other supports come with that home, with building those homes? Typically as governments, we often just look at, okay, we've built a home and we walk away and, here's the good luck. But what other kind of supports are you talking about that come with, you had mentioned high intensity supports.
Yeah, so number one, you are quite correct. It's one thing to build the walls for affordability, but the supports must be in place. And for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, it's the supports of daily living, which vary depending on the needs of the individual, from a few hours a week to help with banking, with groceries, to what have you, to one-on-one constant support to make sure that they're not harming themselves or others in the quest to gain independence as much as possible in the community. So it really depends, but the bottom line is that funding for the agencies, which is generally provincial responsibility, needs to be there and needs to be strong for the supports.
So how can governments ensure that the funding reaches those in greatest need?
Well, that's been an ongoing conversation, and to make sure that the provincial governments get the fair share and that they as well realize, which they do, that those with intellectual and developmental disabilities require their support. But right now, what we are finding more and more is this is the first generation where individuals with developmental disabilities are aging into their senior years. So they are now staying at home longer, and as they are aging and their parents are aging and their caregivers are aging, it's a very big problem for them to be providing the necessary supports that they need as they're aging, and that's why it's so important to make sure that the appropriate housing is there with the supports. And also, as I indicated, over 15% of those in homeless shelters have developmental disabilities, diagnosed and undiagnosed. They have nowhere to go, and they end up on the streets. So with the proper housing and then the supports from the provinces, we'll be in very good shape.
So how can we make sure that, you're talking about $1 billion, that we need $1 billion. How do we make sure that that doesn't just get lost in bureaucracy and actually does what needs to happen?
By indicating quite clearly that those with intellectual and developmental disabilities are the targeted vulnerable community, and that is where the carve-out is to go. And we have seen that proven effective with the beginnings of National Housing Strategy 1.0. And I can guarantee you, based on my member agencies and other agencies across the country, when we know that municipalities and the province have the funds for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, we will ensure it gets spent appropriately and properly. That is not an issue.
Mr. Saini for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, all the witnesses, for the great work you do for all Canadians. My question is for Krista. We are here to come up with strategy for how to improve the system. What part of that is that we need to main and strengthen that is working? And what homelessness initiatives are having a positive impact right now? And why do you think they are succeeding?
Thank you for the question. Again, the biggest change that needs to occur is supporting organizations within both urban and rural centers to support with depth of care. That means providing support that is not time-bound, providing life skills development, providing wellness support, and showing up in the same way that a person with a family and community around them would. So that means continuing to support a youth in particular while they're pursuing their education, experiencing independence for the first time, likely stumbling in the way any young person may, and being there to show up and support and coach. And that's when we will begin to see transformation occur, and that step into a space of being where these youth then convert to contributing members of society. And so if I were to point to a program or initiative that does this work, I would point to Safe Haven Foundation. Again, one of the only programs that has live-in house parents. So this is a key differentiator for us. And what this means is that it is not a group home where staff rotate in and out, clock in and out. It's not a foster home where there's an inherent power dynamic. It is a caring family environment that shows up for youth. And again, there is no limit on the length of stay. We walk with her until she no longer needs us.
Mr. Gladstone, in your statement, you said 3,000 homes are needed by 2031. Are we talking one specific region of the country, or this is for entire nation?
Thank you very much. No, this is for the entire country. The need is great across Canada, and more housing is needed with the appropriate supports. And with Build Canada Homes having the carve-out, it will help significantly. And I would also request that Build Canada Homes provides the funds for organizations such as the Intentional Community Consortium to work with their member agencies to make sure that the best possible applications come in and we can get the funding and shovels in the ground as soon as possible.
Thank you. Next question would be for Mrs. Savage. We know that addiction can play a huge role in individuals becoming homelessness and also having difficulty accessing things like shelter or transitional housing. Can you share some of your experience in this negative cycle?
Qu'est-ce qui contribue? J'ai juste pas entendu la fin de...
What contributes to, sorry, I didn't catch the end of that sentence. Can you finish the sentence?
We know that addiction can play a huge role in an individual becoming homelessness and are also having difficulty accessing things like shelter or transitional housing. Can you share some of your experience in this negative cycle?
En fait,
In fact, one of the issues in Montreal is the need for spaces with a low threshold, a tolerance threshold. So for these spaces to exist, we have to count on a response team that is trained and a team that can maintain a connection with the individuals and to maintain a service that is in line with the person's needs. Often the person, him or herself, takes the necessary steps to move towards, stopping their substance use or otherwise. In the current funding context, which is very much, one-off, there are a lot of interruptions, it's not continuous, it's very hard to maintain that connection of trust. And every time we apply for new project funding, we have to stop programs, we have to hire new team members and everything has to be started all over again. And so this is one of the main issues because to support these people, we need those drop-in spaces, and they're struggling with substance use.
Madame Savage. Madame LaRouche.
Thank you, Ms. Savage. Ms. LaRouche, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, thank you to all the witnesses for being with us today. I would like to continue with Ms. Savage. We have very little time, but I heard what you said, this question of stability for the responder or the person working with the individual. We're talking about homelessness response teams, and let's talk about what else we can do proactively. Are you seeing that things have changed? Are you seeing more seniors, more women in situations of homelessness? Is it due to a social, fabric that has deteriorated or otherwise? Yes, and I'm happy that you're asking me a question that allows me to speak to female homelessness, because this homelessness is less bothersome, so to speak, but it's not less chronic. We have to address it. In Montreal, in 2025, organizations welcoming women, there were more than 40,000 refusals. Cliff confirmed this. That's the partner for fighting homelessness for women. More and more, we are seeing aging women. In terms of the face of homelessness, we're seeing more people who have a job and they're lining up to get food and to get a bed. The day centers are filled with people to whom we've given keys, but who don't have any support. So they don't know how to integrate their living space. They don't feel good between four walls. They need to have an anchorage point in support. We could talk about youth homelessness. We don't see them as much among the emergency or mixed services programs. They need adapted services that reflect their realities. So, of course, there's Auberge du Coeur. That's a network in Quebec. It's a big one, but they need to be supported adequately and consolidated, because there's community services, but there's also the transitional housing services, and sometimes it's permanent services. So there you go. Thank you very much, Mr. Rouge and Mr. Savage.
5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Just before I ask a couple of questions, Chair, I'd like to put a motion on notice for the committee. That given that homelessness, addiction, and mental health challenges continue to have significant impacts on individuals, families, and communities across Canada, that communities across the country continue experiencing rising homelessness, ongoing substance use harms, and increasing pressure on frontline services, that the current approaches have not delivered the outcomes Canadians need, that Canadians are demanding a renewed focus on prevention, early intervention, treatment, recovery, housing stability, and community reintegration, with measurable outcomes that help individuals achieve long-term health, stability, and independence, and that it is important that federal investments support measurable outcomes, accountability, and access to services that help Canadians achieve long-term recovery, stability, and independence. That the committee report to the House its recommendations that the Government of Canada evaluate whether current approaches are achieving their intended outcomes and prioritize investment that demonstrates measurable results in treatment, recovery, housing stability, and long-term independence, and that the House administer existing federal initiatives and funding commitments in a way that prioritizes stronger access to treatment, recovery, and mental health supports, expand access to stable housing options, including transitional and supportive housing where appropriate, prevention and early interventions that reduce the risk of homelessness and substance use harms, measurable outcomes, accountability, and long-term support for individuals seeking stability, recovery, and independence, and collaboration among federal, provincial, territorial, municipal, Indigenous, and community partners to improve outcomes for Canadians affected by homelessness, addiction, and related social challenges. Thank you, Chair.
Do you rather? You put it on notice. You had 3 minutes left to your questioning time.
Perfect, thank you. Ms. Lloyd, thank you for sharing your story with the committee today. Sometimes it can be hard to come forward and share, and I appreciate you so much for being here today. I'm going to start with you. You focus a lot on upstream supports to prevent, which is incredibly important for the prevention of homelessness. In a world where you could see, these supports in a very true preventative way, what are just some of the programs that you think would be important to implement? You mentioned education. Inside of that, though, where do we need to put these programs in place for prevention across Canada?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for the kind words. So yes, absolutely within education systems, but also within, and that means, again, really supporting both teachers and educators with the education and understanding and the coaching for identifying those indicators, right? It's happening inherently, but they're not trained to do this work. And then also investing more heavily in guidance counselors within schools. So again, that is where we're going to have the most success. But also within child and family systems. So again, within Alberta, we're receiving a number of referrals from Child and Family Services because they are so overwhelmed, and they are prioritizing younger children and not youth. So who are, again, experiencing this. And to define, again, hidden homelessness more succinctly, that is the period of time when someone has lost or left their housing and before they present to systems and end up in a shelter. And for girls and young women, that's when they're so much at risk to entering survival relationships and experiencing gender-based violence. So by the time they do present to systems, they have experienced very high levels of trauma that is very difficult to recover from.
So much. Thank you. My one minute or so.
5 seconds.
Okay, Mr. Gladstone, I just wanted to ask you a question quickly here. So you had mentioned a carve-out meeting for Build Canada Homes for people with disabilities. I agree completely. I just learned about what true barrier-free is for disability, and what portion of that do you think is required to ensure that they're supported through the Build Canada Homes program?
Thank you. Well, one of my recommendations is that all housing supported by Build Canada Homes be B3 and Fire Code compliant, which would mean that anyone who needs assistance barrier-free can access. Everything is visitable, and where higher needs are available, that can be built in. The other issue that we're having in Ontario and spreading across the country is if homes are not built to that standard and 3 or more individuals are supported by one agency, they're being evicted by the fire marshal. So need better fire controls, dual stairways, larger elevators, etc., which if they're built at the get-go, the extra cost is not significant, but that's something that Build Canada Homes insisted on. More homes would be available for those with any type of disability, specifically developmental disabilities.
Thank you.
Yes, Madame de Ritter, Ms. Church, to conclude this round for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our guests. This is a very important discussion.
Thank you very much for some of your comments. I want to pick up and give you a chance to expand on a couple of points you've made that I think are very important. I very much share the concern around the overwhelming need for supportive housing right now for people with intellectual and a range of disabilities. And I know that the ICC and RENA is doing tremendous work in that regard. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about the point that you were making about how to ensure that supportive housing projects get built. In addition to the carve-out, what are the ways which we could support ensuring that projects like this come forward? I've heard from other organizations it's around things like making sure that we get through the design phase so that projects are more shovel-ready. But what advice do you have for us to make sure that this is really translated into action, the supportive housing dollars that we've set aside?
Well, thank you very much for your kind comments and for the question. I believe one of the best ways is to have organizations on the ground work with their member agencies to ensure that they know what they are doing. For instance, the whole raison d'etre of the Intentional Community Consortium is most of our members and developmental service agencies across the country are not in the building business, but they have no choice because there are not appropriate properties for the individuals they support to live in, so they have become builders. Some have a tremendous background, as you indicated, from RENA, and thank you very much for visiting some of our properties and some of our other members. So building up and providing funds for the Intentional Community Consortium to bring all of our members up to speed with sharing information, sharing floor plans, etc., will enable more projects to be shovel-ready more quickly. And the whole raison d'etre of the ICC was the sharing of information amongst our agencies to make sure that everybody could benefit, not just the large. So that would be a tremendous help.
Thank you. Let me ask you a little bit, too, about your point around standards. And I know one of the discussions that we're often seeing within the disability community is around how do we ensure that housing is built accessibly as broadly as possible. We have Accessible Standards Canada. We have a certification by the Rick Hansen Foundation. How should we be looking at ensuring that accessible design is being built into supportive and mixed-use housing and actually our whole range of housing?
Well, so thank you. So first of all, the Rick Hansen Foundation does incredible work, and I'm very pleased that, in particular, the Lou Fruitman Arena residents and soon the Frankfurt family will be gold certified Rick Hansen. So I think that is one which CMHC has been using. I also think it's important that B3 Fire Code compliance be a standard for anything that Build Canada Homes is looking at financing, which will increase that as well.
And let me just ask you a question about the mission of the ICC, which I know is to expand affordable housing projects for mixed use. And can you just describe to us in concrete terms, what does that mean, mixed use? Because I just think that that is, in my experience, such an innovative approach to supportive housing, and it's still not well known.
Thank you. So the intentional community is a place where everyone can live with independence, controlling their keys, et cetera, with different people in the building, supported either by different agencies or different types of rent, depending on what suits the needs of our member agencies the best. The ICC is really agnostic on the type of housing and supports that are there, as long as it's additional supports and individuals with developmental disabilities are included. As you are aware, in the Lou Fruitman Arena residence in Thornhill, we have individuals there supported by RENA, by March of Dimes Canada, by Safe Haven for medically complex children and young adults, YSSN for transitional youth, and seniors. There are many of our members who have mixed-use buildings of supportive housing for those with developmental disabilities and affordable housing, or friendly neighbors who help the individuals living there. It's all needed, and it all works wonderfully well.
Church, thank you to all the witnesses. That will conclude the first round. We'll suspend for a few moments while we transition to the second round. Merci beaucoup. Suspend. Back, committee members, and I'd like to welcome our new witnesses for this round. Before I begin, those participating have the choice to participate in the official language of your choice. If you're appearing virtually, please click on the globe icon at the bottom of your surface. Choose the official language that you wish to participate in. And in the room, make sure you're on the right channel to participate in. And if there's an interruption in translation service, please get my attention. We'll spend while they are being corrected. Please direct all questions and comments to I, the chair. Wait till I recognize you before speaking. Please, if you do have devices with you, put them on silence mode and refrain from tapping the boom, those in the room, for the protection of our translators. Each presenter will have a 5-minute opening statement up to. When you're at 5 or a bit over, I'll say thank you and ask you to bring your comments to a conclusion. Appearing with us now is Dr. Andrew Buzari, Executive Director, Gatsu Center for Social Medicine. Jason Miles, lived experience advocate as an individual. Appearing Oxford House Foundation of Canada, Earl Thiessen. Mr. Thiessen, welcome back. You were with us before and we had sound issues, so thank you for coming back. And from Zone Liber, Montpermagog, you will have to excuse me and give us the correct pronunciation, but we have Madame Vandel. We'll begin with Dr. Andrew Buzari. No, with Mr. Miles. Mr. Miles for up to 5 minutes, please. Mr. Miles. Oh, you're in the room. Thank you.
Oh, bonjour. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Miles. I'm here to speak about homelessness and housing in Canada. I'm also here today as someone who is now housed and more than 2.5 years free from my addiction. I know I'm one of the lucky ones. There was a time when I truly did not believe I would ever be able to say that again. I spent approximately 6 years homeless on the streets of Toronto, living with severe mental health struggles, physical health issues, and addiction that completely took over my life. During that time, my life became a cycle of trying to survive. I went through repeated attempts to get help, moments of recovery that didn't last, time in and out of jail, and periods where I was actively using and unable to break free from it. I experienced multiple overdoses, serious injuries, and more than once I came very close to not waking up again. There were moments where I did not think I would make it through another night. And the hardest part is that I didn't go through that alone. My family went through it too. Friends went through it too. People who loved me often had no idea where I was or if I was even alive. Sometimes the only time they would hear anything was a call from a hospital or from the justice system telling them where I had ended up again. Homeless and addiction don't stay with one person. They ripple out to everyone around them. Before all of this, my life looked completely different from the outside. I had education, I had a long-term marriage, I had children, I owned a home. I worked as a construction superintendent and delivered major infrastructure projects across Toronto, including hospitals. I had a career that on paper looked successful and stable. Nothing about my life suggested I would end up homeless. But what I've learned is that homeless does not discriminate. It doesn't matter what you've achieved, what you've earned, or what your life looked like before. It can happen through a combination of circumstances, timing, and the moment when support is not there when you need it most. For me, it was a divorce. It was a poorly timed car accident, and it was the strain of an overwhelming workload I could no longer carry. And within a short period of time, everything collapsed. On paper, I made too much money to qualify for the supports I needed. And that gap, that space between systems, is where I fell. From there, it took years to climb out. It took almost every part of the system at different points. Hospitals, emergency care shelters, harm reduction services, treatment supports that I accessed more than once. It took frontline workers who kept showing up for me even when I couldn't show up for myself. And honestly, it took luck. Moments where the right person was there at the right time. And I think that's what matters. Because when survival and recovery depend that much on luck, something in the system is not working. I'm sitting here today because I made it through that system. and I want to use my experiences to speak about what needs to change so others don't have to rely on the same level of luck that I did. First, we need to stop treating housing, mental health, and addiction as separate systems. In reality, they are happening together for most people experiencing homelessness. And when systems stay siloed, people fall through the gaps between them. We need integrated, coordinated supports where housing is the foundation, not the reward for recovery. Second, we need a clear and navigable housing system that people can actually understand and use. Right now, access is fragmented across multiple wait lists, unclear eligibility rules, and different organizations controlling different parts of the process. Even frontline workers struggle to navigate it. We need a single, transparent pathway into housing with clear information on where housing is available, how people are prioritized, and how decisions are going to be made. Third, we need to scale supportive housing across the full spectrum of need, low, medium, and high support, and ensure people are matched appropriately. Coming off the street is not just about a unit. It requires health care, mental health support, addiction care, ongoing stability. When people are placed in the wrong level of care, they're more likely to cycle back into crisis. We need housing that is matched to need, not availability. Finally, we need to change the public conversation about supportive housing in this country. There is still fear and misinformation about what these homes are and who they serve. But the evidence in my lived experience is clear. Supportive housing reduces pressures on hospitals, shelters, and the justice system, and it costs less than letting people remain unhoused. We need to be honest with the public. The current system is already expensive. The question is whether we spend that money in crisis or on housing that actually works. There was a time when I did not believe I would ever be sitting here speaking to you. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm here because I believe others deserve the same chance I was given, but without needing the same level of luck. What I needed was not more effort, it was a system that didn't require luck. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. We'll now go to Ms. Vandel for your opening statement.
Parfait. Donc, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify today as part of your study on homelessness in Canada. I am the Executive Director of Zone Libre Memphrey Magog, a community-based organization located in the heart of a vulnerable neighborhood in Magog. While our primary mission is addiction prevention and harm reduction, our living environment is an important entry point for people facing challenges related to addiction, mental health, housing, precarity, or homelessness. This proximity allows us to observe daily the close links between these different realities and to develop field expertise grounded in direct support of the most vulnerable people. It also fosters close collaboration with our community, institutional, municipal, and police partners, contributing to better coordination of interventions in our area. In the Memphrey Magog Regional County Municipality, no organization has homelessness intervention as its specific mandate. Yet, for several years, we have observed a significant increase in situations of housing precarity and homelessness, both visible and hidden. Like many rural communities, our region faces the same challenges as major urban centers: the housing crisis, addiction, mental health problems, and poverty. However, we must respond to these with fewer specialized resources over a larger territory and with a service offering that is often more limited. It is in this context that we adapted our mobile community outreach unit and a mobile warming station to provide a response suited to our regional reality. This project, supported under a federal initiative targeting unsheltered homelessness and encampments, allowed us to go directly to meet the most vulnerable people in our area. Between November 2025 and March 2026 alone, we recorded 462 visits and carried out more than 2,310 interventions with people in vulnerable situations. These interventions focused on psychosocial support as well as awareness raising around addiction and harm reduction. They also helped with administrative, government, and legal procedures, access to care and public programs, referrals to specialized resources, and managing complex issues related to addiction, mental health, and socioeconomic precarity. Beyond the service itself, this initiative allowed us to closely observe the realities experienced by people who are homeless or at risk of becoming so. It also helped us better understand the factors that contribute to homelessness in rural areas and the obstacles people face on their path toward housing stability. One of the main observations we drew from this experience is that issues of addiction, mental health, housing, and homelessness are deeply interconnected. The people we supported were not only looking for housing or a place to warm up, they also needed support to access care, regularize their administrative status, undertake legal proceedings, secure income, maintain housing, or be supported along their recovery path. This approach proved particularly relevant in a region like ours, where specialized resources are scarcer and many people remain far removed from traditional services, with little access to means of transportation. The changes made to the management and distribution of funding under Reaching Home, however, posed a significant challenge for our region. We found that the realities and needs of rural communities would have benefited from greater consideration in the discussion surrounding these changes. Organizations that work daily with the people affected have detailed knowledge of local issues and can contribute meaningfully to identifying priorities. We also observed certain difficulties related to the flow of information about calls for proposals and new funding directions. In our case, we were not able to take part in the call for proposals process as we would have liked, which limited our ability to present the expertise we have developed over the years and the needs observed in our region. This situation had concrete consequences. The end of funding led to the discontinuation of frontline services that supported people facing addiction and significant vulnerability. Beyond the funding itself, it is intervention capacity, trust built with people over time, and locally developed expertise that were affected. Our experience leads us to believe that greater participation by rural communities in consultation and planning mechanisms would allow for better consideration of the diversity of realities experienced across the country. Infrastructure investments remain essential, but they would benefit from being paired with frontline services and support that help reach people, prevent situations from deteriorating, and facilitate access to existing resources. In light of our experience, we see several promising avenues for improvement. First, give greater recognition to the expertise of rural communities in identifying needs and developing homelessness strategies. Second, provide stable and predictable support for frontline services, which play a decisive role in preventing homelessness, maintaining housing, and supporting people with complex needs. Third, foster regional consultation spaces bringing together urban and rural stakeholders to share knowledge, better understand the realities specific to each area, and guide investments in a complementary way. Fourth, support rural communities in developing solutions suited to their reality, whether through frontline outreach, emergency shelter, transportation to resources, or local coordination of homelessness initiatives. Our experience in Memphre Magog shows that when communities have the necessary resources and are recognized as full partners, they are able to develop effective, humane responses suited to their own reality. Rural communities do not simply want to be supported, they want to actively contribute to developing solutions. We believe this collaboration represents an opportunity to further strengthen efforts to prevent and reduce homelessness across Canada. Thank you for your attention, and I would be happy to answer your questions. Thank you, Ms. Vandel.
Buzari, for 5 minutes or less.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee for this opportunity to be able to present today. I want to commend the committee for centering the voices of lived experience in terms of the expertise of designing some of the solutions and responding to the housing crisis. I approach this testimony as a physician who has predominantly worked with unhoused patients over the past 10 years. I'm the executive director of the Gattuso Center for Social Medicine and as a researcher at the Dalalana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. My thesis and the thesis that I believe that we have all shared and heard today is that we need to have a more expansive view of the housing crisis as really an economic, social, and health crisis. And when we are making the argument for housing as a health crisis, I would like to point to some of the data that I believe is incredibly damning for us as a country and one of the leading OECD countries, when we know that people who are chronically unhoused live half as long as the general public. That is 20 to 30 to 40 birth days and birth years that are lost. And if there was any drug that would be able to restore 10 to 20 life years, you would think that all funders would be tripping over themselves to ensure that these solutions and treatments could reach more people. We also know that for people who are unhoused, they are likely to be in hospital twice as long, on average for 15 to 16 days. We also know that for people who are chronically unhoused, the healthcare costs are 7 to 8-fold, according to CIHI data that was just released last year. The moral failure, though, I believe that was just recently published by Toronto Public Health, is that for women who are chronically unhoused in the city of Toronto, the average life expectancy is 36 years old. And so this is why that myself and colleagues as health workers and frontline workers have been calling homelessness the most powerful social determinant of health, or really a thief of life years and productivity and health and well-being in this country. I do not believe there is more of a powerful testimony than hearing from Mr. Miles, but I think it underscores the view that this is not about individual failures. These have been policy decisions. And when we see more recently that there has been a real reduction over the last 20 to 30 years in the availability of social housing, now at less than 4%, I urge the committee to read the Scotiabank report of the public housing dividend, calling for a doubling in the social housing supply in Canada, when we've heard again that the wait list to access social housing in Toronto, where I work, is 8 to 10 years. So it is not to be sensationalist when colleagues and I call for the fact that homelessness is a terminal condition. Many of the patients that we serve will pass away before their number is called to get into social housing. This was the impetus for us to launch a social medicine housing model at the University Health Network, which was able to leverage a parking lot in partnership with the federal, provincial, and municipal governments and Fred Victor as a supportive housing agency to establish Dunn House. And really appreciate that Parliamentary Secretary Desrochers was able to visit earlier this year and be able to visit with Mr. Miles and many of the staff that have been working to provide a more comprehensive model that has healthcare right on site. I am privileged to work there as a primary care physician. We have mental health and addictions and psychiatry, Indigenous health programming, and peer workers and community health workers that are all wrapped around the patient and tenant in their journey. Many of these patients have been high utilizers of the healthcare system. We know from some of the local data that in downtown Toronto, 234 patients can make up over 15,000 emergency department visits in 1 year. And the preliminary results that we've been able to see for 51 individuals who've been living at Dunn House over the last 12 months is a reduction by 79% in hospital bed days and a 62% reduction in emergency department visits. We're grateful that this has led to seeing an expansion with 54 more housing units supported by the federal government, the province of Ontario, and the city government to ensure that more people can receive these life-saving interventions and to interrupt these doom loops and really what I would argue have been deaths of indifference that have been occurring across the country. When we look at some of the other jurisdictions, again, and look across the country, there are extremely notable examples of supportive housing working, reaching people, helping people reestablish their own trajectories. But sometimes we can look at countries like Finland that have been the poster child for a progressive way of addressing homelessness. Their rates of homelessness in the 1980s were higher than what we saw in Canada, and they have been able over the last 10 to 20 years to try to eradicate homelessness. But sometimes when I reference Finland, people dismiss the example by saying it's too progressive or too socialist of a country to have as an example for us in Canada. So then I turn to another city that is in Houston, Texas, and that is in the state of the U.S. And then the last 5 to 10 years has housed 25,000 individuals. We've seen in Toronto a complete reversal in this tale of two cities, where homelessness has doubled over the last 4 years. So I believe the urgency for us to act has never been more dire. We know what the solutions are, and I'd also like to commend the Crown Agency of Build Canada Homes that has been able to try to be a vehicle to see more supportive housing reach people. I believe it's an effective avenue that we need to see more investment to try to see many of the housing options reach people, as Mr. Miles spoke to, and obviously seeing, again, a cross-partisan, every level of government approach to try to end homelessness as a healthcare crisis. When we look at Houston as some of the examples that were laid out earlier today, A large part of their success was the focus, the political will across political parties to try to end homelessness, and really this removal of some of the silos and barriers in terms of trying to bring the private sector, public sector, and various community health organizations all together in one room to be focused. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Thiessen, you had given your opening statement last time you were in, but if you want to just give a quick overview at this moment, it's fine. Do you want?
Thank you. Yes. First off, congratulations, Jason, on your healing journey. And thank you for this opportunity to come back and for welcoming me with the other panelists. My name is Earl Thiessen. I am the executive director of the Oxford House Foundation, but more importantly, an alumnus of our program as well. I'm here to provide my experience on homelessness and addiction and the effects of both. And for me, this means healing. My unresolved childhood trauma eventually led me to the streets, to being homeless for 7 years. My unwillingness to face my demons and my use of alcohol and drugs as an emotional response to my childhood trauma were so powerful. The shame of being sexually abused is so intense that many men and women lose their lives to addiction or suicide, refusing to speak about it. We gain knowledge when teaching through words and actions. We heal the same way. The first time I talked about my sexual abuse was while I was in treatment and doing my step 5 with the female elder. I cried for 2.5 hours, telling her about my childhood trauma. I walked out of her room a different man. I held that trauma in for 25 years. I only told my dad about it a few years ago. I didn't want to hurt him because as a parent, you don't want to think that you weren't there to protect your child. While I was homeless, my parents said they wanted one thing from me before they left for the spirit world, which was for them to see me change my life. They got their wish. My parents are no longer with us. After starting my recovery journey and healing from my childhood trauma, I reconnected with my heritage. It played and still plays a significant part in my healing journey. I'm going to speak about, like I was before, about a critical gap in the what we call in Alberta the recovery-oriented system of care, and that is pre-treatment housing. Through my lived experience, I've created a housing model that supports people after their medical detox and their wait to get into residential treatment. Currently, many individuals completing detox face a waiting period of several weeks to months before a residential treatment bed becomes available. Without a stable drug-free environment during this transition, the risk of overdose and relapse is at its highest. The problem is returning to the street or unstable housing post-detox often results in the revolving door cycles, where the progress made in withdrawal management is lost before treatment even begins. The pre-treatment recovery housing model serves as a safety net. It provides immediate stabilization following detox, professionally supported substance-free living environment, preparation and readiness programming for intensive residential treatment, navigational support to ensure the individual's successful transitions to their scheduled treatment date. This model was created from my own experience. After my partner was murdered in 2007 on the streets while we were homeless, I dealt with it the only way I knew how, which was drugs and alcohol. After that, I was just defeated. I came to the conclusion I needed help. I went into detox. I was ready. This was November 13th, 2007. They gave me a treatment date of January. Panic set in, not knowing what was ahead of me, but luckily the stars aligned. But that's where the whole concept of pre-treatment housing came from. And unlike standard recovery beds, the pre-treatment model targets the highly vulnerable window between a person's decision to seek help and the date their treatment program actually begins. The success we measure by is the treatment retention rates. Historical tracking of structured pre-treatment environments shows that individuals in stable substance-free housing are significantly more likely to actually show up for their scheduled intake date compared to those navigating the wait list while unhoused or in chaotic environments. reduced attrition by providing immediate safety, food security, and accountability. The model cuts down on the high drop-off rates common during the standard 30 to 90-day treatment wait list. Early stabilization, residents begin adapting to a structured routine, peer accountability, and basic life skills before they ever step foot into a clinical facility. This means they enter primary treatment physically stable and mentally prepared, maximizing the impact of clinical programming. And I can proudly say that this model that I created is the only licensed and accredited pre-treatment housing model in North America. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Thiessen, for very compelling testimony that you gave to this committee. Thank you for stepping forward and sharing that. We'll now begin with our sixth round of questioning. If everybody is ready, Mr. Aitchison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank each of the witnesses in this round. And I want to say to Mr. Miles, who's here, thank you for being here, and to Mr. Thiessen as well. You have both shared an incredibly powerful personal experience with us. I think that's important for us to hear. I think it's important that that information be central to our report to the House of Commons, and that as a federal government, that we play our role in working with the other levels of government that are engaged in this issue. I'll say that this is one of my great frustrations with our country. It is that we are an incredibly decentralized system where there's lots of overlap, and homelessness happens to be one of the most glaring examples of the disconnect that exists between the lived experience of people struggling and the various layers of bureaucracy and government and policy and ideas on how to address the issue. And so, and I want to state very clearly that I don't think that that is a partisan issue. I don't think that that is either a liberal or a conservative or an NDP problem. I think that is a generational evolution of how things have happened in this country. But if anything calls for all levels of government and people of all political stripes to come together and not just pay lip service to the incredibly powerful stories we've heard here, not just today, but throughout this study, this is it. This is it. Mr. Miles, I'll ask the same question to Mr. Thiessen. Your experience, as you spoke about how lucky you were. And your healing, I couldn't help but think to myself as you spoke that it really wasn't, it was lucky that you were able to navigate a system that really wasn't really all that comprehensive, and it didn't really work all that well together. But could you speak to us a little bit more about the power of relationship in your healing? Not just being a number, not just getting a bed somewhere, not just being part of a program, but the importance of relationship to your healing journey.
Yeah, thanks very much for your question and your comments. Relationship plays powerfully into my own journey. To my own journey from addiction and homelessness, the starting point for me, the real tipping point, was I continually found myself in and out of hospitals and jail systems, and it got to a point where I really hit some low places in life, and I had I actually tried to end my own life on more than one occasion. And these weren't cries for help. These were well planned out, well thought out. You know, there was no hesitation. And I really got lucky that, you know, my story gets to continue based on other things I couldn't account for. A frontline worker ended up saving my life the first time I tried to do it, and she shouldn't have been there at all. She knew me very well. I went into safe consumption sites all the time, and she knew who I was. The only reason she was around to save my life was it was a Friday evening, and she'd actually stayed at work 3 hours after she was supposed to be done because she was going on vacation on Monday. So she shouldn't have been in the building at all. She came out into the alleyway, you know, and again, that's another thing where, you know, she never leaves out the back door into that alley because it's unsafe. As a young, good-looking woman, she always went out the front exit of the building onto the street lights. And, you know, that's just one of many incidents that it really took a frontline worker to make me feel valued enough. And not just from being put in the position to directly have to save my life, but just the countless times they showed up for me. They connected with me. You know, when you're living in an extended period of homelessness and suffering, you know, those kinds of things that we do, we really feel outside of society. You know, we get used to people looking at us, giving us, like, you know, oh, get a job, you know, what's wrong with you? We get used to that judgment, and you know, so for me, one of the times I ended up in a hospital, I had a frontline worker would continually come every other day, take time away from her day, and would come and just to bring me cigarettes and wheel me in my wheelchair out so I could have a smoke, and that was the only person I talked to. So it was a lot of little things like that added up over time. But without frontline workers, I wouldn't be here to speak to you guys today.
I'm officially out of time, but I'll ask the chair just for the moment to say thank you. Thank you for your resilience, and thank you for your courage to be here. Thank you.
Okay, we're okay to go? Good? Louis? Yeah, okay. Monsieur Villeneuve, pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Villeneuve, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Miles, Mr. Tyson, I am very touched by your testimonies. Your contribution, just in being here, is very important. Another thing I'm realizing, we often think that we're sheltered from going through these types of things, but I listen to your life stories, and I'm realizing that that's not the case. Nobody is immune to that. Very honestly, I don't know if I would have had the courage to do what you did this morning, and I thank you, really, from the heart. If you were a legislator, I'm asking both of you the question. I want to try to make this short so I can give you the chance to speak. If you were legislators, what would be the 3 priority measures that you would put in place to try and eradicate homelessness? Let's start with you, Mr. Miles.
Well, thank you very much for your comments and your question. First and foremost, we need to massively scale housing across this country. Housing needs to be delivered quickly, and it needs to be delivered without reservation. It can't be based on, you know, perceived merit, or you know, it can't be that reward dangled at the end of making your transition through recovery. Housing is the foundation that everything else is built on. You can't ask somebody who's experienced long-term homelessness and addictions. You can't take away the addiction because the addiction is what they're using as the Band-Aid. You know, taking somebody's addiction away without them having stability and a home, you know, you can't fix that without taking the reason they're using for the first place. So that would be my first suggestion. My second suggestion strongly is we need to really integrate systems together, but we need to make sure that everybody is talking and it's one voice. We have too many people, too many different agencies controlling different parts of housing lists. We have too many people that, you know, they only work on their component, but that extra needed component is just one more thing out of their reach. And they kind of go, you know, that's not mine, that's that guy's to do. So we really need to take the red tape out of the way, and and not just for the clients and the people trying to transition from homelessness, but for the housing agencies that are working with them too. There's a lot of people that work in the field all day, and they have very little understanding of where they get help from certain points. So if somebody like that who's educated in the system and works within it all day can't figure it out, then, you know, the system's not working. And I'm being mindful of time, so I'm going to cut it off there. Thank you.
Merci pour votre contribution. Il me reste...
Thank you for your contribution. I have 2 minutes and 45 seconds left. I'm sorry, Mr. Tyson. I really want to speak with Ms. Vandal, who's from my riding. Ms. Vandal, thank you for being here with us today. Thank you very much. I know that Zone Libre, Memphre Magog, does excellent work in my riding. In our riding, I'd like to know, on your end, since the pandemic, have you observed enhanced needs related to addiction in Memphre Magog? Well, I can't necessarily say if it's associated to a specific period in time. I think those issues have always existed. They didn't necessarily increase. However, we're seeing addiction issues among younger people. You know, we're talking vaping, smoking cannabis products. So when it comes to the pandemic, I think it's just that the category of individuals affected by substance use is, you know, they're younger. As for the most vulnerable clients, who would you say they are? Well, I'm speaking on behalf of my organization. So those are the people I know. So we're in a more vulnerable neighborhood. And so our clientele is of all age groups. It can be high schools, adult schools, post-secondary, and aging individuals. And with homelessness, sometimes there's seniors who have less access to housing, but that was before. But now we're seeing a younger group of the population struggling with that as well. So we're trying to work upstream and focus on prevention. But we're seeing younger people with more complex situations. Thank you very much. I have 45 seconds left. How can the federal government better support organizations that act upstream before things get to homelessness? Well, I would say that outreach is really what's important, especially in our region because it's more rural. People don't have access to services easily. There's no public transit in our municipalities, so you have to go out and go towards them, because asking them to leave their comfort zone and go towards, you know, services, that's difficult. So there needs to be a link, a connection made with the community services. That's what's needed for more vulnerable individuals. I thank you very much. Thank you.
Monsieur Villeneuve, Madame Larouche pour 6.
Ms. Larouche, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. Thank you for being here today. Mr. Miles, you have lived homelessness, just as Mr. Thiessen has. I can assure you there were more than a few tears shed when listening to your stories. Thank you for coming to see us, Mr. Thiessen, and thank you for adding your voices to this study on homelessness. Mr. Bouzari, you've devoted your career. In fact, you've decided to work with these individuals, and you remind us that homelessness doesn't discriminate. And anyone, in fact, is, you know, could easily end up in a similar situation of homelessness. For my first round, I'd like to turn to Ms. Vandal because we are in regions that are close and we share similar realities. I'm in the riding of Shefford with Grand Bay in the middle, and we have a lot of rural areas surrounding it. You said a number of things in your opening remarks that really spoke to me. You talked about you talked about not being able to apply for certain requests for proposals. Did I understand properly? Yes, you did. What happened is this year, it was the end of the fiscal year, end of March. It was the PRCC process, and it was about renewing funding. That was the first one. And then we heard that Reaching Home was going to be more focused on urban settings. So we didn't get the call for proposals, and I don't think we were alone. We're part of a regional group, and several didn't receive it, so we weren't able to apply. So, our territory is very vast, and now we have no funding. And I can talk to you about St. Francois, Quaticook. They're going through the same thing. So we're at the end of our projects, and in fact, the services are going to have to stop very abruptly. And so it's not clear what services we'll be able to offer this coming winter. Well, I can confirm that we're part of the same region in Estrie, the Eastern Townships, and there's a designated community known as Sherbrooke, and everything around it, including Grand Bay, are not considered designated community, and so they can't get their share of the pie. And yet we hear about homelessness quite often that is rising in Grand Bay. So when the minister says that after 2028, what's going to happen with Reaching Home, well, I imagine that this discussion needs to be broadened, the one on designated communities, so that more people can benefit from these projects for the work that you're doing every day. Well, I would say that, yes, even with the testimony we heard today, homelessness starts and then there's kind of like a snowball effect. If we can focus on prevention and work upstream and offer outreach, that way we could avoid the problems we're running into now, because what we're facing is not the same as what's happening in the big cities, but these needs become greater. It's really strategic. We could put in place measures to deal with the problem earlier. So yes, we need to consult communities that are more remote, more rural regions. That's very important, given that our reality is different and we want to help our clients, even if there's many of them. I think that's important to consider. It's an interesting reality, and we have to make sure that funding is enhanced and take into account these things. You talked about a mobile intervention unit. Now we've got Impact de Rue in Grand Bay. That's a mobile unit that travels around. There's also another program that goes out to see people directly. In Saint-Césaire and Rougemont, they go meet them where they are. When we talk about prevention and intervention, that's what needs to be done. What do you think about these units, and what do they change, really? We already had a unit that we used to establish connections with our community partners, but when we had the idea to use it to go on the ground to see clients, well, our problem in our area is that we don't have access to homelessness directly, and resources in Sherbrooke are either fully utilized, or people in our area don't necessarily want to completely change their lives and go towards the urban centers. So with that unit, we were able to cover the entire territory, which is quite large, without necessarily interrupting service. Because if we go see someone and we offer them tools, after we bring that person to an urban setting, well, when the person comes back, because their family is there, well, and a network is important, let's not forget, well, then there's a disconnect, there's an interruption, it's a temporary situation, and the person has to start all over again. We want to go to them, we want to hear their recommendations, because, of course, they know their situation very well, and that way they can tell us how we can better help them. Very quickly, you spoke about the 1030 neighborhood. You said there was a change between elderly people and younger people. Yes, we we are present in this neighborhood that used to be a manufacturing neighborhood, and so mostly seniors live there. And we're really seeing that over the last few years, maybe because we work closely with people experiencing homelessness, but we're seeing a lot of young people using our services. We've got about 3 or 4 people who are under 40 years old and who come to use our services to get food, clothing, bathe. That's a very recurring situation. Thank you very much, Ms. Larouche. Ms. Goodridge, 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here. Jason, thank you for sharing your story and being so vulnerable here in our committee. It's incredibly important to hear the perspective of people with lived experience. And Earl, thank you so much. You're not here in the room, but I want to share with you that there were very few dry eyes in this room, and a lot of Kleenex has been passed out. And thank you for always being willing to share some of the hardest parts of your life to demonstrate the fact that recovery is in fact possible. Both of you men help make our society a better place by showing that recovery from addiction is not just something that could exist, but something that does exist, and it lives every single day. So I just want to sincerely thank both of you for that. Dr. Bardisi, in hearing what Oxford House does and their pre-treatment model, do you think that's something that would help the people you support in Toronto, a model similar to that?
Sorry, I just want to make sure the question was for me. I know Kareem Bardisi well, but I just want to make sure. Yes, no problem. I just didn't know if Kareem was in the room, so I apologize. It's hard to tell from here. No, thank you for the question. I mean, I think from our sense is, again, I think there's some superb supportive housing model examples. Oxford House is one that you mentioned. I think Jason and the other witnesses spoke really powerfully to ensure that there's not, an abstinence model, that there's options for people in their recovery, that people can access mental health and addictions, can access various supports, both social and health. And so I think really more of these integrated models that ensure that there's healthcare and social care supports right where people live, to me, has shown a lot of effectiveness in terms of the evidence base that we've seen.
Earl, where exactly is your guys' pre-treatment housing currently located, and approximately how many people are you able to serve at once?
Right now, our model is only in Calgary. We have 4 homes, 16 beds. Just have to brag a little bit off of those 16 beds last year. 231 people went to residential treatment safely. And what keeps popping in my mind is, could you imagine if we had 160 beds or 1,600 beds across the country, the amount of people that could find healing? I also wanted just to state that we do OAT. It's a very unique model, right? There are house leads in there. I think peer support and like many of the other panelists have stated, having immediate support is crucial. We need that, and with the lived experience of our house leads, actually most of my staff are in recovery. A few are graduates of Oxford House, but it's just it's such a revolutionary model. I think it can have a massive impact on homelessness and addiction across the country.
I know I've had the absolute honor of getting to tour a few of your houses and meet some of the spectacular people, and have had the opportunity of reconnecting with them a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out, and see the amazing piece and how their lives have been changed as a direct result of this supportive housing that you provided and the path towards recovery. Do you guys have any plans or intention to potentially expand? It's clear that there's a need.
Perfect question. We're actually in the process of expanding this program to Edmonton. there's a desperate need in Edmonton. It just breaks my heart, the homelessness issue there. But I've walked those streets. I've talked to people, and the wait list to get into recovery centers is one of the biggest issues. So I'm just happy that the government of Alberta has approved funding to move forward. We're going to start with 2 homes. And I told them, I said, within 6 months, you're going to need 2
really
more.
Quickly, I've got a few seconds left. Are you able to receive any funding from the federal government, or is all of your funding coming from provincial and municipal sources?
All of our funding currently is from just the province. We are going to be reaching out to the federal government because this is revolutionary for the country.
Thank you, Ms. Goodrich. Madame de Rocher pour 5 minutes.
Ms. Desrochers. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you to our witnesses. Thank you for being here this morning. In particular, Jason, Earl, thank you for being here and for sharing your experiences.
My colleague, the member from Parry San Muskoka, for his opening statement and his willingness to work together across parties on this key issue. Really appreciate this. I want to turn first to Dr. Buzari. We've heard today, but also in previous meetings on this, about how housing is really the foundation of addressing the crisis. Not the only thing. I think we talked a lot about prevention as well, and I'll come back to that. And also ensuring that housing meet the needs of where the residents are at and what they have. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the role of provinces in providing the wraparound support. And I know that in the case of Dunhouse, I think it's a successful partnership, but it's not like that for all other projects that move forward. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and I would echo the encouragement of hearing Member of Parliament Aitchison speaking to the need of all parties to address this crisis. I think when we, again, look at the example in Ontario, I think where the supportive housing piece, the supports are crucial. When we look at some of the housing first models in the US and other jurisdictions, where some of them really have fallen flat is where there's not the wraparound supports, to your point. And so I think the supportive element of the housing beyond the door and room is really in many ways the secret sauce to a lot of the success. And again, in terms of the Dunhouse model and social medicine housing, the province has been an instrumental partner in investing in the wraparound supports, both from healthcare resources that are there, as well as the 24/7 permanent supportive housing model. And was really encouraged to hear Mr. Fleck in Ontario speak to it at Dunhouse 2 as a model of supportive housing being something that can help alleviate hospital pressures, but also build infrastructure. And of course, ultimately, from my vantage point as a physician, try to drive better health outcomes.
Thank you. I'll just continue on this because in a previous conversation, you and I talked about the cost to, and because, for the provinces, it comes with, they have a limited amount of, fiscal capacity, but the cost of homelessness to outside of just the human cost, which is the most important, but in terms of hospital stays, in terms of ER visit, in terms of incarceration, do you have, how can we better make the case? And do you have data that you could share with the committee, and anything you want to share today on this?
Thank you. When we look at the data or the health economic analysis of the benefits of housing versus some of the counterfactuals, it is over $50,000 a month to be in hospital. It is nearly $15,000 a month in the provincial jail system, which is in many ways acted as a de facto mental health system as people can't access care and support. That was so evidenced so powerfully today. And around $7,000 in shelter to less than $5,000 for supportive housing. So the cost calculus, I think, is really clear. And as I referenced the public housing dividend, some of the modeling that Scotiabank and partners put forward is that in investing in social housing, their projections are that there would be over 500,000 hospital bed days reduced in that period of time over the next 10 years, as well as 147,000 emergency department visits avoided. So I think there's a real both economic argument, and as you mentioned, I think the human dignity piece that we've heard so powerfully today, but from an economic and cost-effective perspective, I think seeing the major banks and many different partners and communities been making this case for so many years, I hope it only has more resonance.
Mr. Buzari. Mr. Miles, thank you again for sharing your experience, but also for the work you're doing every day, I think, in your community and with your peers as you try to support them. You talked a little bit about the difficulty in accessing information and figuring out, where am I on the list, and I'm just wondering what would have been helpful when you were going through this, as we're trying to see how we can be better at integrating and coordinating and for people to know where to go find the information, what could have been more helpful?
Yeah, thanks for your question. First and foremost, we just need more of every support. We need more pre-treatments. We need more housing. We just have the biggest struggle is we just have too many people trying to pull from the same cup, and it's just empty. So first and foremost, it's that, and then second, we really need clarity on the system. There's a lot of different housing developments that are in the works or have been so in the past, and there is always this confusion over whether it's controlled by the municipality, whether it's controlled by the building operator, whether it's controlled by the developer. That's typically somebody else. And it ends up leaving this confusion where somebody in the streets or somebody homeless trying to work with their housing worker, they hear about a building, they're like, oh great, they're opening this building up here. How do I get in there? And nobody knows. Trying to find somebody that knows how to get into that building is very, very difficult. And a lot of times they're actually set up initially as an invite to apply only. So they've got whoever is the building operator running it has their own people in mind that they're trying to support. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we just need to have more clarity in the system on for those trying to navigate it, because it's creating chaos.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Madame Larouche, pour 2 minutes 30.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're really realizing that this is a complex issue and we need a continuum of services, prevention and then support right at the end of the line. So once again, Mr. Miles, Mr. Buzari, Mr. Thiessen, thank you very much for being here with us. We're dealing with a unique reality. So Quebec, I'd like to come back to Ms. Vandal. Well, in fact, July 1st is in barely 2 weeks, and we know that in Quebec, this is a critical period because there are people who end up homeless, they lose their homes. What is the situation with only 2 weeks left until July 1st? Well, we recently had a consultation to speak about the options leading up to July 1st. We know that it's already a little late to address the problem. In general, people who are at risk of homelessness, some people might not have a rental contract, for example. So the housing units already have measures in place. That means people can use services for emergency services. The issue for us is that people who are already homeless and don't fall under one of those categories. We're talking about addictions, mental health issues, or maybe they're chronically homeless. So often those people aren't part of the categories. They can't be put on wait lists. And in our region of Memphremagog, we can't support them in that way. So for the others who are at risk, we're able to put measures in place and we can support the individuals and collaborate with more affordable housing. options. But this type of, there's different types of clients. So there's people who are at risk. There are some things we can do for them, and there's a network that's a little stronger versus an individual who is already homeless and their situation is chronic. I barely have 30 seconds left, but I would end with something on prevention. You talk about young people, seniors. Services for seniors and vulnerable individuals, should they be enhanced? Because we're seeing a lot of people are suffering from the fact that they were either removed from their homes or rents have been increased. What can be done upstream? Well, for me, the help we should offer should be broad. If one person has supplemental income, they're not going to be more supported with their mental health issues. They're still at risk. So it's really around support and resources for helping them. That's where we could be more complementary in our offering. Thank you very much. Ms. Larouche.
Please.
Thank you, Chair, for extending the time for the 5 minutes to speak. I want to start by thanking Mr. Miles and Mr. Thiessen. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here and sharing your stories from one recovered addict to another. I know how hard it can be to come forward, but the importance to do so that we can change lives in Canada. So thank you so much for being here. We've heard so much today about the importance of all parties coming together, all levels of government coming together, and the importance of ensuring people with lived experience are part of the solution. We heard great success stories today. Dr. Boozery and Mr. Miles working together in Toronto, and amazing success that you're having by ensuring that lived experience is a part of it. Mr. Thiessen, your program is phenomenal as well. And so I'd like to just turn the conversation a little bit towards hope and to those who might be wanting to take that first step into recovery. Mr. Miles, you spoke about you didn't walk that journey alone. Your family walked that journey with you. A stopping point for me in the beginning was guilt because of my decisions I had made and that effect that it had on my family. What would you say to someone wanting to take that first step about your family and the fact that they're still there?
Yeah, that's a difficult component for sure. I carried a lot of shame and guilt for a lot of the things I had done. The types of things I did to survive and to feed my addiction were certainly things that I never thought I'd be capable of doing. A lot of people got hurt. I did a lot of theft and that kind of thing. And you really feel like once you've gotten to that point that there's no coming back from you now. I've saw the time I spent in jail and all the things I kind of did. You realize you get this view that I'm not worth it anymore. And if I can instill anything in anyone, it's if somebody like me who did all the things I did, can find my way back again. And not just live a life that's sober, but live a meaningful one where I'm involved in my community. I make life better for other people. If somebody like me can come back from that and do it, there's hope for everyone. And just keep trying, and you're worth it.
Thank you so much. Mr. Thiessen, you spoke about how really healing sucks. And I know healing sucks. You cried for 2 hours. I've cried until my body ached to get through that healing. But on the other side of that healing is a big, beautiful, happy, healed, healthy life. And so, although it sucks, what would you say to someone to start their journey towards healing?
Thank you. It is a difficult process to begin with, but I think that I love the word hope, right? You take a chance on yourself, right? We're so hard on ourselves. Jason said it, the shame, the guilt, this firsthand, Kelly, as well. It's you. I fully believe that you have to speak to heal, right? And that's where the big risk comes up. A lot of people in business say, you know, in order to get successful, you have to take the risk. Well, in order to recover, you have to take that risk as well, but do it for yourself. I also believe that we should meet people where they're at, but let's not leave them there.
Thank you so much for everybody's time today. It was an incredibly impactful day, and so thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madame de Ritter. I must say the world is a better place because of you stepping forward as a parliamentarian. To conclude, Monsieur Joseph for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank all members of the committee, witnesses, you, first and foremost, and especially Ms. Kelly, who came to the committee to offer her support. Thank you, Ms. Kelly. And I'd like to thank Mr. Thiessen, who shared his life story with us. I have a question for Mr. Thiessen. It's quite simple. In your opinion, what intervention or measures, pardon me, you've understood this morning that homelessness has become politicized, and that's not normal. And I'd like to apologize to the committee for this morning, for the exchange I had with the previous witness. Because we can't, at the expense of individuals who are very vulnerable, make political gains. I apologize. Because I've never experienced homelessness, but I do know some who have. Individuals from the LGBTQ plus community, women who have slept with individuals they didn't want to because they wanted to have a place to sleep, or because it's cold outside. I think I will give my speaking time to Caroline, who's in charge of the file. Thank you. Thank you, Nathaniel. As you can see, it's a very emotional time. Thank you to everyone who shared their experiences today. One question I had earlier for Mr. Thiessen.
Better help, and the system at all level, better help. We talked about prevention. Like, who could have caught that you were being in the situation that you were in when you were young? How could we have done better with that? Is it at school? Is it at the hospital? I don't know. I'm just really looking for that question.
That's a very good question, and I could feel Mr. Joseph shame in there. I could just feel my body. And I get it. I understand. Times have changed a lot. We really need to pay attention to our children and what they're doing. These things here are having even a larger impact because we didn't have these when I was a kid. But the fact of letting our kids and youth go on, not even just unsupervised, but to know where they are. I had free reign. I ended up at an older gentleman's house, and he fed me alcohol, which was the access to was huge. Fed me alcohol, and I blacked out, and I woke up. I was being sexually assaulted. So prevention is everything. But what we need, and I think a big part of the focus that is being missed is the lived experience piece, right? We have something that can't be taught, and unfortunately, a lot of us have that due to the trauma we went through. But I would rather have less people with lived experience in the next 10 years that had to go through what me and Jason and so many other people have went through, to be able to just to help. We have to break the cycle, right? That's what it's about. It's about breaking the cycle. Lived experience, mentors, peer support, supportive housing, all of that, and it starts at school. Some of the stuff they're introducing at school, I don't think is correct. It wasn't there when I was young. So why is it there now? And we had it hard enough at our age. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thiessen. Thank you, Madame de Rocher. Thank you, Mr. Joseph, for bringing this important study forward. And again, thank you, Madame de Ridder, for sharing your experience as well. Hopefully, I would ask if the committee would consider providing written drafting instructions to the analysts by Friday, June the 26th, so that they can begin working over the summer. Obviously, it's not the final part, but if the committee would accept providing written drafting instructions to the analysts on this very important study, this will be a test if this study can actually move the bar on addressing this issue. The second part, if we have agreement, is the clerk circulated a draft a press release announcing the winner that you chose on Monday for the Centennial Flame. Is it the will of the committee to circulate that? Seeing no concession. With that, again, thank you to committee members. This committee has dealt with a lot of compelling issues, notably C-222, which actually affected significant change. I, for one, will be looking forward to this report being tabled in the House and seeing that it does begin addressing some of the issues that was so well and personally put before this committee over the past period of time. Thank you for each one of you for participating. Enjoy your constituency time, and we'll see you in the fall, I believe, unless the House gets extended into next week. But with that, thank you, and thank you to the witness for sharing your personal time. Without that input, we can't move to begin change. So thank you so much. With that, is it a will of the committee to adjourn? Adjourn. you.